Good, good afternoon, everyone. You guys hear me okay? Okay, very good. Well, welcome to our session on the first day of NIC. It's great to be here. My name is Wally Mead. I'm a principal program manager with Cyruson. Probably the first time you've heard me say that before. Every other time I've been here, which is my third year doing this event, it's been Microsoft. And if you hadn't heard, I left Microsoft last year in May after 22 years being at Microsoft and the last number of years in the product group. So I moved to Cyruson in May of last year, so working in the community and area, so doing a lot of presentations, user groups, blogging, and they've even got me doing some tweeting now. So yeah, just don't, if you go in there and follow me on Twitter, just don't expect a lot of activity. I'm still new to this thing. I've even trying to figure out how to do these reply things in Twitter, so I'm pretty new to it. Anyway, this is a two-part session. So even though my title here, slide title, says parts 1 and 2, it's one big PowerPoint. We'll see how far we get in part 1, and we'll pick up there for part 2. So this is a two-part series on my favorite configuration manager features. To give you a little bit of background, I've been asked for a number of years what my favorite piece of the product was, and I would always just say everything. Everything in ConfigMan 2012 is great, which it really is. But they kept pressing me on this, so finally I decided, okay, I'll do a presentation on it. And I've given this a couple different times, including last week in Dallas at System Center Universe. But there I've only ever had an hour to do the presentation. So here they gave me 2 hours to do this presentation. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to be able to spend more time in demos than I have been, be able to add in more tips and tricks, why you really want to utilize this feature. Here's something you can do to make it better in your environment, as well as why I'm seeing people misconfigure some of these features. And then the very end of the presentation will be some other features that I think are great in the product that are underutilized, some that you guys may not even be utilizing in your infrastructure. So we'll throw all that in as much as we can in the 2 hours we have. So we have this hour, a session break, and then the last session of the day back in this room. So I think it's 5:20 p.m. So let's go ahead and jump in. As you have questions, ask them. And I'll be downstairs, hopefully in the break between the two if you have more questions. Then hopefully you can come back for part 2, and then I'll be here for the reception party tonight. So, all right, so my agenda is pretty simple. All I want to do is discuss those things that I really like in the product. Because again, I've been asked numerous times what my favorite features in ConfigMan are, so I'll talk about that. I'll do as much demo as I can to show you some of these features. My end goal is to either get you utilizing these features if you haven't been utilizing them in the product, or get you to maybe use them a little bit differently and maybe more efficiently or effectively than possibly utilizing some of these features now. And then again, I'll talk about how I see people misusing some of these features, misconfiguring them, or just not implementing them successfully. And then as we have time, we'll talk about underutilized features. So just trying to get you to utilize your infrastructures better with Configuration Manager as that media to do your management. Okay, so the previous slide did say that these are not necessarily in priority order. So this is not 1 through 10, or whatever number I have in here. However, this is number 1. If I was still using ConfigMan 2007, and I'll go ahead and ask, how many people are still using ConfigMan 2007? Don't be shy, go ahead and raise your hand so I know. There are a few of you, good. I'll go ahead and ask, anybody still using SMS 2003? No hands, please. Okay, good. Great answer. And it's okay that a few of you are still using ConfigMan 2007, that's all right. But if I was still using a previous release than 2012, this would be enough incentive for me to scrap what I have today and move to the ConfigMan 2012 product because of the client health feature. So there's 2 capabilities with this feature. The first one is to find out what your currently active clients are. And where that's really important to you is management comes to you on Patch Wednesday for you guys and says, how long is it going to take us to roll out February's patches to our client base? And you have some idea based on previous months' experience and so on. But when we rolled out this feature in what we used to call ConfigMan vNext, which was now 2012, with my TAP customers, I polled them before we implemented the 2012 Beta 1 product. I said, what's your current client health rate? So if management asked you, how many clients can you hit with this software distribution or this patch process, what would be your percentage? And all the customers I asked were around the 80 to 85% range. They figured that at any one point in time, they'd have around 80 to 85% of their clients that were healthy and communicating on the network. Well, this feature tells you immediately how many clients you have, not on the network right now, but over the past 7 days. How many of your clients are active on the network communicating with Configuration Manager in the past 7 days? So now you can go look at the dashboard, which I'll show you in a minute, and you can immediately tell your management, oh, I've got 97% of my clients are online. Again, active in my environment. You have trend analysis with it, so you can view over the last 90 days what that percentage has been. You might see a few peaks and valleys, but for the most part, you expect it to be pretty consistent, around the same. Of course, you have vacation periods, and I know you guys are in Europe, so you probably take the whole month of August off, or maybe July, so things drop dramatically in that period of time. We don't do that in the US. We might get 2 weeks vacation and people spread it around. We don't have whole countries going on holiday at the same time. But you can tell immediately what kind of percentage you should hit, so what your SLA is going to be. The second capability here is that automated remediation feature. So when I was talking to my TAP customers, I asked them, again, that percentage, they said 80 to 85%. And I asked them, how much effort do you have to put in to troubleshooting client health issues to get your environment to that 80 to 85%? And they all said it's some X number of hours on a weekly basis, or maybe a larger number of hours that they just did one time a month. But it was numerous hours a week or a month that they would have to spend troubleshooting client health issues, fixing those clients so that they were back active in their network, and they were still only hitting the 85% range at a top end. So, and a couple of TAP customers, we immediately implemented vNext, which again turned out to be 2012 R2, or 2012. And their client health numbers skyrocketed by 10 to 15 percentage points. So they went from the low 80s to mid 80s to the mid to upper 90s, because Configuration Manager every single day does a health check on every single client, has a couple dozen different things it checks for. If they're not working properly, we reset that. We remediate that to fix those issues. So that's jumped them up 10 to 15 percentage points with zero admin effort other than implementing 2012, which they were going to do anyway. So now they can take those hours a week, hours a month that they were doing on client health and either devote that to that last handful of clients that aren't getting fixed, or to really doing their jobs, which is deploying their patches and upgrading their software and everything else they needed to do. So fantastic capabilities in the product. And again, the number one reason that I would have jumped to 2012 as early as possible. So let's go ahead and jump over and take a quick look at that. So here's my environment. If I go to the monitoring workspace and click on client status, you can see at this point in time, it's summarized 4:48 a.m., which for me was exactly an hour ago. Yes, it's 5:48 in the morning for me, but I am wide awake. So that's the last time we summarized, and that's important for you guys because that's the last time this status has been updated. And by default, it gets updated on a daily basis, which you can change that time and you can force it. So right now it says, in my collection, I only have 5 clients in my demo environment. You guys have hundreds, thousands of clients. 4 of those are active. So it says I have 4 active clients. So I have obviously 1 that's not currently active in my environment. So down below we see this link right here. It says inactive clients that have passed health check. So let me go ahead and click that. It's a hyperlink. It creates a sticky node for me in assets and compliance and tells me my 1 computer that it's not active. And it gives me a status right now of inactive, and the last time we did health check on it, it passed the health check. So it's not communicating because it's unhealthy, it's just not on the network. So it hasn't been there for a while. If you scroll down to the bottom, let me go ahead and go to the client activity tab. You can zoom in, and you can see the last time this guy did communicate on the network, and it was 6 days ago. So 6 days ago is the last time this guy did communicate. Now, if you guys know the feature, you know by default it's looking anything in the last 7 days. And so I went ahead and changed my value below that just because I'd been using these images and saved them with the snapshot recently, so that's why it's updated. So I actually don't have this image running, so let's go ahead and start this image. So let's go ahead and take member. We'll just go ahead and start him up, and he'll be up and running in just a couple of minutes, and then he'll report in, and we'll verify he's active on their network. So I don't even have to log into him. We'll just get the computer started. Now, the next portion of that is that client health feature. So for my client health, I actually want to go to my Windows 7 client, which is sitting right here, and we're going to go to Control Panel. You guys probably don't hit this specific scenario in that you most likely don't have your local users being local admins. The vast majority of the world doesn't do that. There are some customers that want that capability. And sometimes when you make a local user a local admin on their box, they do disastrous things for config managers. Here you can see it's running, but we can go and let's go run services.msi, or MSC, I'm sorry. And sometimes your end users will go in there and they'll see, or they'll hear from somebody else that, oh yeah, if your computer is not working very well, go to services, take this thing here that you'll see in services called SMS agent host, and turn that off. So go ahead and tell it to stop that service, and you don't want it to restart on you next time you reboot. So not only do you stop it, but come on, there we go. You go ahead and set its properties so that it never restarts again. Now this is absolutely unsupported by the product group doing this, but you have end users that do that. So obviously we're no communicata with Configuration Manager. So no patching, no inventory, no nothing here. Well, if it were appropriate time, then my CCM eval would kick in between midnight and 1 a.m. every day. Now in my case, it's 5:53 or whatever it says down there, so it's already past that time frame. So I'm just going to go ahead and launch it off manually. So we'll launch a command prompt. We'll go to Windows, CCM. We'll run CCM eval, which I'll zoom in here for you. This is the utility that gets run every single day between midnight and 1 a.m. I'm just going to force it to run manually. So this is going to go ahead and run. It's going to take it a couple minutes to run. And you'll see right now in Task Manager, CCM eval is running. And it's loading CCM setup because it's checking to see is all the appropriate stuff there for Config Manager, or all the Config Man requirements, prerequisites there. So it's checking that. So that'll take it a minute to run, and we'll come back to him. Let's go verify our other guy. So let's go over to our site server now, and let's see if our member server has reported in. So let's go back to monitoring. Let's go to client status. I guess we could go ahead and look at DDM. Yep, it just updated a minute ago, which is probably the member server sending in its heartbeat DDR. So we'll assume that's the case. So let's just go force this guy. By default, again, it runs on a daily basis. We don't want to wait till tomorrow. You guys won't be sitting in here. Well, maybe you will for some other session, but I won't be here doing this for you. So we're going to go ahead and force it to run right now. So we'll say refresh. We count to 17. That's generally how long it takes this process to get updated. And then we go ahead and just do our little refresh. And then our time here will change from 4:48 to 5:55 when we're done refreshing here. There we go, 5:55. And now it says we have 5 active clients. So in our case, our client issue is only because that computer wasn't on the wire. But now I have a very clear picture as of right now over the past, whatever my parameter is. These are the number of clients that have been updated. Now if I click that same hyperlink down here, it says 0. Goes back here, I don't have any more inactive clients. If I go look at my devices node, come on mouse, and go to member, and now we zoom in down at the bottom. There we go, heartbeat DDR was sent at 5:53 a.m. So it has communicated in that last X number of days, so it is now considered an active client. So very easily that happens for you. Let's go see if our Windows 7 client is back up and running. He is. So CCM eval is done. CCM exec is back up and running now. So now if I do a refresh on services, oops, not properties, refresh. Now we see it started, and it's set to automatically start. So our health evaluation process said this service is supposed to be running, and it's supposed to run start up automatically. So it did take care of that for us, so fix the problem. Now, the most common problem you guys have is not this one. The most common health problem you have is WMI. So WMI is busted. We have a number of WMI checks in our health check as well that will go out there and reset or repair WMI after we do some validation tests as well. So that takes care of the number one problem people run into. Okay, so now if we go back into our console for 1 second, then we'll go back over to our slides. Go back over to monitoring. And notice there's a bug here, and this is the R2 release. That is supposed to say client status, but once you click one of those hyperlinks like I did, and you come back here, it resets the node name to whatever link you selected. If I close the console and restart, it'll come back and say client status, but that's my client status node. If I come here and click on client activity, this is where I can see that here's my trend analysis, and these are images I don't keep up and running through on my laptop. But you guys will have your site server, won't be being shut down, it'll be running constantly. So you'll have a nice trend analysis over the last 90 days so you can see what your client health values are. And again, you're going to be up there in the 90 percentile range and so on, 90 some. If I go on client check, tells me the same thing. And again, I do my trend analysis to make sure, am I having any common issues in my environment? And in my case, I'm not. But let's go look at my client that I did remediation on. So let's go back to client 7, it was. I go to client check detail. Then down at the bottom, it gives me my status. And it says, I had 2 problems. The service for the SMS agent host service startup type, as well as the service status. It says it wasn't running, and it wasn't set to automatically start, but we, in our goodness, where'd the mouse go? There we go, there it is. We went ahead and fixed that. So it remediated those 2 issues for us. Very often what you'd see here for the rule name, it'll say verified WMI read-write integrity test. And it will say failed and then remediation successful. So we're out there fixing your clients for you, keeping your clients active on the network, obviously through Configuration Manager, as long as they're up and running, so that you can now get 95, 97, 99% patch efficiency in your environment, or replace Adobe Reader 10 with Adobe Reader 11, or whatever the scenario is, keeping you active and valid on your network environment. So again, that's my number one feature. The rest of these are not necessarily in priority order, but that one is. Okay, the next one is role-based administration. So a couple of you said you're still running ConfigMan 2007. I'm sure the vast majority of you came from ConfigMan 2007. And you guys all remember the instance security rights and the class security rights and the pain in the, butt it was to have to try and configure those so that you could try and control who was doing what in your console. And you never really got it to where you really wanted it to be. You lived with people having more rights than you wanted, just because it was so complex to configure. So even if you did get your security rights pretty well ironed down the way you wanted them to, that didn't adjust the console. I still would see everything in the ConfigMan console, regardless whether I could do anything in any of those nodes or not. So to prevent exploration of the console, investigation, which always leads to disaster, because when you show somebody something, they try and click on it, nothing happens. They keep trying to figure out why, and they hack into things or whatever, they bust something. So you would create custom MMC consoles, distribute them out to the appropriate users, which worked great until the next service pack came out or the next cumulative update came out or whatever it was, and you have to redo the same thing again. So now the role-based administration feature in 2012 is fantastic. It's a great way of controlling who can do what, on which objects, on which clients or resources. So I'm saying this user has these security roles, utilizing these security scopes, can be implemented on these collections over here that I have access to. So you're really locking down who can do what. Everybody has to use RBA, role-based administration, in 2012. There's no getting around it. So you are utilizing it whether you know you are or not. Hopefully you just have it implemented very, very well. So it's a great ability to control who can do what in their environment. And again, a lot better than the ConfigMan 2012 environment. Now, one of the cool things that happened in the R2 update to ConfigMan 2012 is that this feature also filled down into your reports. in 2012 RTM and SP1, if I was locked down so that I could only see servers in my console, but if I went and ran a patch report, and that patch report was one of the default reports that scoped to all systems, then I would see patch status not only my servers, but also my desktops, which is not what I want to see. And maybe the server guys don't care as much about that, but the workstation guys definitely don't want to see the servers in their patch report. So a lot of times you either had to create custom reports, which aren't always the easiest thing to do, or I'd still see people creating separate primary sites for servers versus workstations just because reports didn't filter properly, didn't show the correct results. Now, RBA in the console got rid of those multiple primary sites that you guys might have had to separate your server guys from your desktop guys, because you were absolutely fearful of that. The server guys were so paranoid that a desktop admin might accidentally deploy a patch to one of his servers, which meant it might reboot outside of their configured maintenance windows or when they wanted it to reboot. So you would have separate primary sites. So role-based administration took care of that, but the reporting technology still wasn't great. R2 took care of that. So now your reports should show the same stuff as you see in the console. So RBA functions there. And it's not only for the built-in reports, any custom reports you create, you can just implement the RBAC function and it will go ahead and use RBA in your reports as well. Now, as I said, everybody technically utilizes RBA in their environment, so you have to. But I do actually see people misutilizing it. So too often I see end users or admins in the console that have full administrator rights. Full administrator means you do everything. I have all objects I have access to as far as actions that I can perform. Now, there is one or two little things that only the full administrator who installed the site can do, outside of just somebody I added with full administrator rights, but that's very, very limited. And I think they probably actually got those fixed by now. Oftentimes, I also see people with the all security scope. The all security scope, or even the default security scope, generally lets you see everything by default. And you don't want your desktop guys seeing all the server packages, server software update groups, server task sequences, or OS images. So you definitely want to create custom security scopes. And then I very often still see people giving their admins access to the all systems collection and the all users and user groups collection, the two root collections. Don't do that. Create your own collections, assign those custom collections to your admins to limit what they can do, the damage that they can cause, because they are going to cause damage, as you know. Anybody who has a console is eventually going to get there and do something wrong. So these are all bad things to do. So you want to go in there and really implement RBA properly in your environment. And I don't have time to do a whole session on it here, but I did do a webinar on it. I think it's up on the Cyerson website back in September or October of last year, a whole hour and 15 minutes on RBA. I'll just show you a couple little things here quickly to whet your appetites on that. So if I go to my administration workspace, go to the security node, click on administrative users, and I'll zoom in here in just a second. I'm going to add a couple more columns, attributes. So I've created a couple different users, Travis and Wally. Both those users have application administrator as well as software update manager roles on them. Oops, sorry about that. Travis has the all workstations collection, so he only manages workstations. Wally only manages servers. And we have different security scopes assigned to us, so we only see each other's objects. This was incredibly hard to do, next to impossible to do in ConfigMan 2007, which meant you'd have a separate primary site for your server guys, you'd have a separate primary site for your desktop guys, which meant you had a central site above that for your consolidated reporting and all that administration you wanted to do, which meant 3 server licenses for Windows, 3 sets of hardware, 3 sets of SQL Server licenses. Now it's a single one, because you can do all this in a single environment. Okay, so now if I go ahead and launch the console in the context of Travis, for example, I'll launch it off as a different user. First thing you're going to see is that this is my same computer, my exact same console installation, but the console doesn't look the same. So Travis in the Assets Compliance workspace doesn't see software metering, doesn't see asset intelligence, doesn't see endpoint protection, compliance settings. He doesn't see the stuff he doesn't need to see given the 2 roles that I've given him. If I click on device collections, Travis only sees all workstations, which means he's not seeing my servers if I have my query set up properly for all workstations. So if I go to devices, he sees the 2 workstations that he should have access to. You don't see DC, you don't see member, you don't see primary. Those are my 3 server-based computers there. Okay, so now if Travis wants to create his own collection, which he's going to want to do, provided my security roles allow him to do that. Travis, oops, I can't even spell Travis. And he has to create a collection, it has to be limited. The only collection he has available to limit himself to is the one he's been assigned to. So he can't, even though I gave him the all workstations collection, he can't create a query that says show me all the servers too. He is locked down to what I gave him. So he can create his own collections below his sandbox, but nothing that expands outside his sandbox. So that's very, very cool that I have now locked him down. He can't do any extra stuff. So now if I go to applications, so software library, notice no operating system deployment. Go to applications. He has an application here, and if I add in the security scopes attribute, you'll see it's assigned to the desktop security scope, so he's allowed to see it. Same thing if I were to go look at my packages. He has a couple of packages here that are assigned to the desktop security scope. And then lastly, if I go to software updates and go to software update groups, he's got one software update group that again is assigned to, oops, sorry about that, wrong button, to the desktop security scope. So I've really locked him down. He only sees workstation objects. Anything he creates gets tagged with the desktop's security scope by default. Now if I go ahead and do the exact same thing, but I'll just go ahead and load Wally real quickly, just show you a couple differences real quick and then we'll move on. The exact same security roles, application administrator, software update manager. Again, I'm missing the same stuff I shouldn't have access to. My collection is all servers, not all desktops. And if I look at my devices, I see those other 3 computers. So Travis can't see my servers, I can't see his workstations. We're safe from bothering each other's environments. So when he logs on, he thinks he's got his own primary site. When I log on, I think I have my own primary site. So very, very cool. And if I go to software library, applications, you'll see that I don't see XML Notepad. I've got a couple different applications available to me. And if I just add that security scopes on there, you'll see that they're assigned to the server's security scope. So that's why Travis didn't see them, and I don't see XML and Notepad because it was assigned to the desktop security scope. Okay, so I'll kill these 2. I'll show you one last thing, and then we move on. So even if you guys are very comfortable with this, very likely, I hear customers all the time that say, I want to get more granular than this. I want to go ahead and control more granular than what I have. So we have these built-in security roles, which you can't modify. You can't modify any of these 15 security roles that are built in. Can't delete them, can't change the permissions. But what you can do is you could take one of them, and I'll take Asset Manager, I can copy it. I'll say AM with collections, and then I can go to my, in this case, the collections permissions, and I can say I want to allow this role, anybody with this role, to modify collection settings. That lets me set a maintenance window. So you can go create your own custom security roles to add more permissions or remove permissions. And that's the most common thing I see people do, is they'll create a custom security role to remove some of the rights that we put in our default template. Because you think we may have given you too many rights. So you go ahead and create one. Sometimes I also see people that will take 2 of our built-in roles, merge them into one. So they only have to see one thing assigned to a user. All right, so the last thing is, let me go back to Travis, for example. And Travis right now only has one collection. Let's go add another collection to him. And I'm going to give Travis, just for grins, I'm going to take all servers. Okay, so in this scenario, Travis has 2 security roles still, application administrator and software update manager. He's got one security scope, desktops, which is immaterial for our current discussion, but he's got 2 collections. That means Travis can do application deployment to both collections. He can do software update management to both collections. Let's say I want Travis to be able to deploy software to my servers, but not patches. But I want him to deploy patches to his desktops. This doesn't do it. This gets him both roles on both collections. It's a union of everything. But now, if you go down to this bottom option, which most people don't implement, that you probably should, so let me go ahead and select that. And here it's easier to see. I have this security role on those 2 collections. I have this security role on those 2 collections. So you can see it's a union of both roles on both collections. My scenario, that's not what I want. So I'm going to go ahead and say application administrator. I'm going to edit that. I'm going to say he can't deploy software to his workstations, just for the demo here. And I'm going to say I do want him to deploy patches only to his workstations, but not the servers. So now when I implement this, it's saying this role is available to that collection only. And this role is available to that collection only. So now I've restricted what access, what security role can work on which collection. I can also put in custom scopes here. So I can have the desktop scope for one and the server scope for another. So now it's not a union of everything. It's a one line is each individual row is a unique record. And that's how we're accessing the product. So if you need to get more granular, you can do so. You're just taking this bottom option here on your user and then adding on your collections and then doing the customization that you want to. So something that oftentimes needs to be done, but people just don't know how to figure it out. So they give the full administrator and then they give all the collections, the root collections. Now you should be able to figure out how to do that individually and get more granular and be safer. Okay, I got a half an hour. Okay. All right. So I guess we did the demo time on the previous slide. Okay, migration. I know the vast majority of you already said you're on 2012. That's fine. But I'm going to talk about migration for a minute for you guys, even for a specific purpose. So when you guys moved from SMS 2003 to ConfigMan 2007, if you did, you had 2 choices. You could do an in-place upgrade, an upgrade from SMS 2003 to ConfigMan 2007, which kept all your settings, all your packages, all your collections. It kept everything, just upgraded the infrastructure. Or I saw a lot of people would do a wipe and load. They would throw away or F-disk their SMS 2003 server and then start from scratch with ConfigMan 2007. And the reason for that was, I got a bunch of old garbage out there. I don't want to bring it over to my new environment. I got these packages, these advertisements, these collections that I haven't used in 5 years, and I don't want them anymore. I've just been too lazy, haven't had the time to go back there and get rid of them. I've been spending all my time on client health. Well, with the ConfigMan 2012 product, when you do your migration, you can pick and choose which of those objects you want to bring across. There is no in-place upgrade from 2007 to 2012. It's side-by-side migration, but we have built-in console capabilities to move those objects, collections, whatever it is, you want from old to new infrastructure. So a lot of you are thinking, I don't care, I'm already past that. But the cool thing is this works from 2012 to 2012 also. So I'm going to put you all on the spot for a second. And if I were to ask you all to raise your hand if you have a test lab that mirrors your production environment where you do all of your modeling and testing in, you would all raise your hands, right? Not many hands are going up. So if you did have a test lab and you were doing all this testing in your test lab, so you created your application, deployed it, worked great, or collection, or whatever it is. You then had to recreate that object in production. Every single time you do something that worked in lab, you move it to production, it no longer works. You forgot some setting you had to do, you forgot some configuration thing you had to do, you screwed up something. Well, now you can go to your test lab, you can successfully do your testing there, and you can migrate that stuff from your test lab to your production environment. No recreating of anything. You just have to connect the new environment, production, to your old environment, lab, connect them together through the migration utility, and say, move these objects over. And bingo, we do all the recreating for you. So very, very safe. The 2 caveats you have are, it has to be the same version of Config Manager. So 2012 SP1 to 2012 SP1. 2012 R2, 2012 R2. Yes, you can still go from 2007, for those of you that raised your hand, to 2012 RTM, SP1, or R2. That's fine. Yes?
What about the CU level?
CU levels are immaterial. So yeah, the CU level doesn't matter whether your test lab is CU4, because you're testing the new CU4, and production still CU3. Yep, doesn't matter. Now, there could be a bug that's there, but that's fixed in CU4, but yeah, for migration, it's fine. So, good. So that gives you that confidence that you can go ahead and move things over and have it work. So that's why it's important for you guys, even if you are already on the 2012 product. So let me just show you that real quickly. I am going to move from ConfigMan 2007, but it works exactly the same way from a ConfigMan 2012 environment in your lab. So if I go to migration node, you notice down here my dashboard is all empty. There's nothing because I haven't specified anything. So I go to specify source hierarchy. And this used to say in ConfigMan 2012 RTM, used to say top level ConfigMan 2007 site server. But now that we support 2012 to 2012, we just say top level ConfigMan site server. So in my case, that is primary 2007. So that's one caveat I gave you. The second caveat is that these two servers have to have unique site codes. You can't migrate from ABC to ABC. You can migrate from ABC to XYZ or XYZ, but you can't migrate the same site code from lab to production or any production to production. It only works between two site codes. Okay, we connect up to WMI, the SMS provider, on the source site, in my case primary 2007, which I spelled correctly. And we also go to SQL Server. So I'm going to specify an account I want to use. I'm just going to use the built-in administrator account because I know it works. And let's see if I can type in my password correctly. I did. Or at least I typed it the same twice. It may not be correct, but we'll verify that. So we're going to go here. First thing we connect to is WMI. So I'm going to say go to WMI. And we're going to go to the root SMS site underscore TST. Oops, hit the wrong button again, sorry. He's going to zoom in for you. I'm going to go to that namespace. I'll say test connection. This verifies that the credentials I gave it have the rights to connect to my WMI to that namespace, and that connection worked. Okay, we can use the same account for SQL Server or a different account for SQL Server. I'm going to try and use the same account, so I'll say now SQL Server, and I care about the master database, but the one I'm interested in is SMS underscore TST, which is my ConfigMan 2007 database. I'll test the connection there, it works. So I'll go ahead and say yes, use the same account for both, which is what this option is down here. And I'll let that kick off. That kicks off what's called the data gathering process. So the data gathering process is a read-only process. It goes from my target server, my destination server, over to my source server, reads from the SMS provider, so you have to know the provider computer, reads from the site database, you have to know the database computer name, named instance, and so on. And then it tells me all the objects it found. And it's all done. I could have clicked the checkbox that closed the dialog automatically. And now if I scroll down, it says here for objects, my environment has 39 objects that it can migrate. And obviously the gray scale there means nothing's been migrated because I just specified it. Okay, let's go ahead and kick off a migration job. So we just go specify and create a migration job. I'll say collections. Probably want a more descriptive name than that, but I'm just going to say collections. And I'll do two different jobs for you. And I want to take my collection I created, which is campus. And I want to click next. It shows me then all the objects that I created that are targeted to any of my collections that are in that campus tree, because it's an empty collection with two sub-collections in it. And it says I have some software distribution advertisements, packages, a configuration baseline, and a configuration item. So now think about the scenario. I got all that old garbage that's out there. Well, I don't really want the ConfigMan 2007 toolkit because I'm going to use the 2012 toolkit. So no sense bringing that across. So I can clear that. We also maintain relationships. Let me go put that back in there for a second. Let me go to my packages. And I don't want the ConfigMan 2007 toolkit package. So watch what happens when I clear that. We pop up a dialog saying, hey, if you don't take the package, you can't take the advertisement that's utilizing that package. So we know that we can't migrate this deployment because I didn't take the package. So I click continue. Now you see that both of them say 1 out of 2 instead of 2 out of 2. So you get a cherry pick which objects you want to bring across for this migration job. So I'll just say next, and I'm just going to go through the wizard. You have to specify security, so which admins can access this object. And I'll say default and desktop. I don't have to worry about collection limiting or site code replacement. I want to start the job right now. So bingo, it's off. It's going to start the job in a few seconds. We'll come back and look at that. Let me show you one more thing, then we move on. I'll just call this objects. And there's another type of migration job down here called object migration. Collection migration says, let me take this collection of collection definition and all objects targeted to it. Object migration says, let me just take, hit escape, objects. Let me just take and pick and choose from this list. Let me pick and choose which objects I want. So now if I go ahead and I say, yeah, I want boundaries. If I click software distribution packages, we tell you in the status, one was excluded. You told me not to migrate it last time, so I'm not going to select it again automatically for you this time. And one's been migrated already. So we give you that status. I'll take configuration. I'll take the configuration baseline, which tells me, hey, if you take this configuration baseline, you have to take that configuration item. Now, in my case, I'll clear that because it says migrated. It's already been migrated, so I don't need to bring it across. So all I'll bring across is boundaries for this one. Asset intelligence catalog. I had a couple of customizations of the catalog. You also software metering rules and so on. I can take anything in my software updates, my OSD stuff. I'll say yes, yes. And maybe this is stuff for Nikolai to go do OSD because he's my OSD guy. So I can create a job called Nikolai, pick and choose all those OSD jobs, things that he needs to have, and create those and bring them across. So I'll say these are server objects. And go ahead and kick that job off right now. And bingo, when I go ahead and refresh this, the first one will say completed. And if I look at objects and job, it shows me all those objects that it created. The second one, even though it says not started, you can see right now it's already completed those 3 things. So if I just refresh the console, this one will say completed. Okay, just real quickly show you what it did. For example, assets and compliance, device collections. It doesn't say campus, building 1, building 2. But if I hit refresh, now it gives me a drop down because we took campus, which was an empty collection, made a folder out of it, and put those 2 sub-collections as collections in that campus folder. We don't support sub-collections anymore. So those 2 sub-collections became regular collections, and campus, which is the empty collection, became a folder. And then we would have brought across the, I guess it was software distribution packages. So if I go to packages, and there's my XML notepad package that I brought across. You can tell it was migrated across because of the site code, the package ID. TST was the 2007 site code, and CIR is my 2012 site code. That lets you see that it was migrated as opposed to recreated. Anything else I want to show you there? I think we're good on migration. Okay. What time do we got? I want to make sure I don't run over. I got another 17 minutes yet. Okay, good. Okay, custom client settings. This is very, very cool as well. This was another common reason I saw people in 2007 and prior releases having separate primary sites, because they wanted to have different settings for different sets of clients. Oftentimes it was servers versus workstations again. You'd have a different hardware inventory configuration, SMS def ma file for your servers than you would have for your workstations. Or maybe even different inventory schedules. And yeah, schedules you could do pretty easily with local policies, but SMS def ma files, there's 1 per site. So you'd have to have different SMS def mas, which meant different primary sites. Well, now you can have customized settings on a collection by collection basis. So what you do here is you implement your common settings that you want the vast majority of your clients to have, which likely is your workstation population, put those as default client settings. And then where you want those one-offs, where you want that customization, you create a custom setting, most likely for your servers, and change how you want things to operate there. And then you deploy that custom setting to that collection of clients, and then we figure it out, we being config man, on the client, it figures out which policies to implement, which settings to get configured based on all the different settings. Because a single client can be in multiple collections, which could have numerous different custom settings on them. Most of the time you only have a handful, so it's pretty easy to figure out. But in the console now in R2, we added a capability for you to see what that resultant set of policies is going to be. So very, very easy for you to track what should get implemented on your client computers in the end result. So now if I go back to administration, let me close down security and migration. Oh, let me go back to migration. You see, didn't show you this. The dashboard updates to show you, hey, you have migrated some objects. You've also excluded some things. You said, I was going to select them automatically, the migration job, and I said, don't migrate them. So those are the excluded objects. So this will keep track of your migration status, including clients, which I only have one client, which you would not use Configuration Manager for a single client. I understand that, just a demo environment. Okay, so if I go now to client settings, so my default client settings I have configured. You notice that Computer Agent has nothing specified for default name in Software Center, which means the default name is IT Organization, pretty generic. And Remote Tools is not enabled, so it is disabled, which is the way I want for my majority of clients. Okay, I want to create a customization now. So let's go create custom client settings. And also I want to change things on my time. I still got 15 minutes, don't I? Wasn't it 6? I go to 40 after, right?
You still have some minutes, but try to wrap it up.
Oh, did I start at 20 after? I thought I started at 40 after. Yeah, I started at 40 after, so I go to 40. Okay.
My bad.
Okay. You threw me off? Okay. I thought maybe I was still jet lagged, and I thought I was good, but my clock still has U.S. time on it, so I was trying to figure this out in my head, but the minutes should stay the same. So, okay, all right. Okay, 14 minutes now that we wasted a minute. I get the minute back? Okay, all right. All right, we're good. All right, so I'm going to go ahead and say custom clients, and I want to change Computer Agent, and I want to change Remote Tools. So I select those, go to Computer Agent, and I'll put in NIC 2015. And Remote Tools, I want to go ahead and configure that. I want to enable, and I want to have Config Manager automatically enable the TCP 2701 port in the firewall. Because that's the most common problem people had in prior releases. They'd enable remote control, but they wouldn't enable it in the firewall. So they configure it to work, but the firewall was blocking it, so remote control would never work. This does it for you automatically. So I want to go ahead and do that. Very good. We'll say OK. And now I take that custom. You see it says deployments 0. That means it ain't going to do anything. Now, even though default says 0, default doesn't have to deploy it because it goes to everybody by default, i.e. the name. I want to go ahead and deploy this. Now I'm going to go ahead and say to all workstations. So that becomes a policy. The policy engine's working right now. It takes it a few seconds to create that. And then the next time anybody in that target collection retrieves policies, they'll get these settings, they'll implement them, they'll override what was in the default, because everybody gets the default. Now, I'll go ahead and show you that in just a second. So what I want to do is talk about my next favorite feature, which is a way to get those guys getting policy right now, which is the client notification feature. So we see a lot of customers that want to get things happening very, very quickly. Normally, you guys deploy your software after hours. So you deploy your patches after hours, you deploy your software after hours when there's fewer people on the network, your end users have gone home, so they're not disturbed by reboots or whatever. So that's all fine. You don't care if it takes an hour or more to get stuff happening after hours. But there's some times where those out-of-band things happen, you got to have immediate action. And so you have two choices. You either implement one of those right-click tools, utilities, or you scale down, you drop down your policy polling interval from the default of hourly to something smaller. I've seen people drop it all the way down to 2 minutes, 5 minutes. Not a good idea. You can kill your site infrastructure by dropping your policy polling interval down to single digits. So please do not do that. So the product group recommendation is to keep it at the default of 60. Let things happen on an hour basis. I actually know some people, because of this feature, have actually increased that setting now. They're checking every 2 hours just to cut down load on the network. And then when they have to have one of those high priority things, they just use this client notification feature. So this feature allows you through the config-man console, right-click, download computer policy. Right-click, download user policy. Go to the collection and say, hey, I want you to evaluate your software update deployment evaluation. I want you to go to endpoint protection and download definitions or do a quick scan or do a full scan right now. Now, it doesn't do everything that those right-click tools do. No heartbeat DDR, no hardware inventory, software inventory type stuff. So it's a handful of things that you can do, but it's a great start. And the most common things that you need to have is that policy polling to get your clients doing something immediately. So again, the downsides to decreasing your policy polling interval is that it puts extra strain on your environment and it reduces your scalability. So by default, you can support 25,000 clients per management point, which sounds like a lot for you guys. But let's say you take that 25,000, you go from an hour cycle to a 10-minute cycle. You've dropped down your supported number of clients by 1/6. So instead of supporting 25,000 clients on an MP, you're now supporting 4,000 clients per MP, which still may cover enough for you guys, but it's still a lot more traffic on the network because every 10 minutes you're checking, hey, anything new for me? Hey, anything new for me? Hey, anything new for me? Instead of just leaving it hourly, and then when you need to, go ahead and force your stuff because you know there's something there, instead of the client randomly checking. And that's not random. It's happening on an hourly basis or whatever your schedule is. Now, we did test this at the product group to a full-sized hierarchy. So something that none of you are going to have, which is hundreds of thousands of clients. So you can go to your CAS and you can right-click, go to all systems, and have it trickle down to hit every single one of your clients. So it does do that. It performs very well at that. We don't want you doing that, but it can be utilized for that feature. So the goal here is to keep you at that 60-minute cycle and still get your stuff down when you need it. So I implemented that policy. I'm going to go to my collection. In this case, I'm going to go to all workstations with the same collection I pushed to, but I could go ahead and say all systems or all desktop and server clients because my workstations are in there. The other guys just won't have anything new for them, but I'll just make it simple. Now, we do tell you when you right-click, client notification, download computer policy. We added in R2, we added the download user policy. That's new in R2. And I lose context when I zoom out, so I got to rezoom. Yeah, go back here. Download computer policy. We tell you, hey, you're going to generate activity for X number of resource, in this case 2. So just letting you know, I'm hitting the network, because what I'm doing from the site server, I'm pushing this policy basically down to the client through the MP. So we're saying that's happening right now. So if I go to my Windows 7 client now, and if I go ahead and services.msc, and if I go and look at this, config-man remote control service. It's there now. It started. It wasn't there by default, remember? It was turned off. It was disabled. So it is there now through this client notification feature. And if I go ahead and load Software Center, all programs, System Center, it should say NIC 2015 in the upper right-hand corner instead of IT organization. So this pushes that policy all the way down. What happens is your clients register with their management point 10 minutes after the client starts up. And they try and register over TCP. It's a specific TCP port. The TCP port I'll show you here is 10.123. Oops, not the one I wanted. I want to go back to my site server. Go to administration, sites, go to site properties. And then on your ports tab, oops. Again, wrong button for zooming in. There you go, client notification. It tries to register over that TCP port, 10.123. You can change it if you want to, obviously. If it can't register on that port because it's blocked in your firewall, which likely it is, then it will fall back to HTTP. And you can't have that port blocked, because if that port's blocked, your client ain't talking to config manager, because it has to talk over bits in HTTP. So you can't have port 80 or whatever your client port is here. This guy can't be blocked. One of those two's got to be working. So we'll try TCP first. If that doesn't work, then we'll fall back to registering on HTTP, and that's the communication method the site server will use to push to the MP to push down to your client computer. So you get to control that. Okay, now he's got me paranoid on my time. I got 6 minutes. Okay. All right, so I can get one more thing in here probably before we break, and then we'll do the rest in the part 2. So packages and programs. So packages and programs, you guys all live in the packages and programs model. And the reason being is you're familiar with it. You had it ever since SMS 1.0, way back in 1994, and it's worked. You guys know it inside and out. You know how to make it work. You know all the idiosyncrasies with it. You're happy for the most part with what it gives you. And you already have your wrappers built in, or you got those queries on your collections all figured out to get the proper guys and the proper collections. So everything's good, ready, happy. There's limitations with the packaging programs model, however, that we tried to overcome with the application model that came out in the ConfigMan 2012 product. A lot of you guys still live in the packages and programs scenario because of that familiarity, and just haven't invested the time into the application model because packages and programs work for you. So, applications. In packages and programs, you guys actually will go ahead and you might have one package, set of source files, with a half dozen or whatever number of programs. Programs are your command line. What do I do with those files? And when you want to deploy that software, you have to say, I want this program from this package to go to that set of clients. I want this program from that same package to go to this other set of clients, collections. But it's up to you guys to determine the program from the package and the collection. With the application model, you just say, take this application, deploy it to those clients, and the client will figure out how to install it properly, which program to run. Now, in application terminology, they're not called programs, they're called deployment types. So as you guys are thinking, package means application, program means deployment type. So we'll figure out which deployment type to run on the client based on some criteria. And that criteria is the next bullet down. It includes requirement rules to help dictate what should happen. Requirement rules are, in essence, how much disk space, how much processor, how much memory, am I logged on as a proper user type stuff. All those things today you guys are putting in your query rules on your collections. So you have these very complex query rules that say this computer, or you remember this collection, if you have this much memory, this much disk space, this type of processor, this software is not already installed, and then you can fall into that collection. You guys all know the problems with that are twofold. One is it's based on hardware inventory, which doesn't always work right for you. So you may have hardware inventory that's out of sync because of numerous different reasons. A very, very common reason is your inventory files are too big. So by default, the site server will only process an inventory file up to 5 megabytes in size, which sounds huge, and in most of the time it is. But I have a customer, or I had a customer when I was at Microsoft, that they had inventory files that routinely, thank you, that were routinely spanning 5 megabytes in size. So you can go to the site server's registry, you can set a registry value to tell it to process a bigger size file, and it will let you go up to 50 megabytes in size. Okay, that covers everybody, right? Wrong. The same customer, they had inventory files from some servers that were larger than 50 megabytes in size. So there was zero way that the site server would ever process those. So they just had to come to the realization that they were never going to get hardware inventory from those terminal servers because they had implemented all the asset intelligence classes, installed executable as well as software shortcut, and that just made their inventory files balloon big time. They actually wanted us to increase that limitation to 100 megabytes, which was going to catch all theirs because theirs were in the 55 to 75 range, but product group rejected that. So they just know they can't get inventory. So those computers aren't falling into the proper collections. So because inventory may be out of date, you may have computers in collections they shouldn't be in anymore, or computers that aren't in collections that should be based on lack of hardware inventory. So that's one downside to your query collection rules. The second one is that's processing time on your server. Your server has to go and process that information. And it takes a burden on the processor and memory of that site server to run those query rules to evaluate to see who should or shouldn't belong in those collections. So we didn't have incremental collection evaluation for a long time. And even in 2007, it only does additions, it doesn't do removals. So it wouldn't effectively get you what you needed, so you always had your collections updating on an hourly basis, or worst case, every 24 hours. Now, if you look at 2012, your default's 7 days, weekly evaluations with 5-minute incrementals because you can process things more quickly and easily. So I got 1 minute, so I'll finish off this slide, then we'll have to do the rest of the application model when you guys come back for part 2. So there's your tease to come back. So the next thing you have is in your query rules, you have if this software is not already installed. So you're looking at hardware inventory to see is ABC application already installed? If so, don't go in the collection. If you don't do that, then what you have a wrapper like wrapper.exe, that's your program that you advertise, and that wrapper.exe would go ahead and launch off. It'd look for that software application that you really are interested in. If it's there, it bails out and says I was successful because I'm already installed. If it doesn't find that software, then it would let that setup.exe or whatever it is run to install that program. Well, that's kind of cumbersome on you guys. You have to figure out those hardware inventory rules, or you have to create those wrappers. Application model has detection methods built into it automatically, which means we look to see, is that software there? If it is, no sense having us reinstall it because you don't care whether it came from config.man, whether it came from the web, whether it came from floppy diskette, which nobody knows what they are anymore, USB stick or whatever. You just want the software there. Now, maybe you want additional things in your software, so you may add some enhanced detection methods. Not just the software is there, but a specific file version to make sure it's the correct version of your software. And then lastly is dependencies. You guys can do that with programs. You can have run another program first. It's kind of cumbersome and some limitations there. The application model with dependent applications is much easier to work with and much more effective. And I can show you that after our break and the next session and the break after that. So at 5:20 or whatever time that is. So yes, I am over time now. So I'm not going to get to show you the rest of the advantages of the app model or why you don't use them or my demos. So if you want to see those, you're coming back at 5:20, the same place. If you don't want to see that, then that's fine. You don't have to come back. But I have more things than this. This is not the last favorite feature. And I also have more, like 3 or 4 more favorite features and a few that are underutilized to chat about. So I'll stop talking in this one. So this is where we'll pick up in part 2 on app model slide 3. And we'll come back for that one. I'm going to be there. If you guys are there, great. If not, I'll talk to an empty room. I've done it before. So, and I got 0 questions there too. So thank you all. Have a great rest of your day, and hopefully see you in an hour and 20 minutes, or an hour 40 minutes, whatever it is. I guess it's an hour 40. Thanks, guys.